only thing that cuts deep in Cold Pursuit. Beneath the snow-packed roads and the quiet life of a snowplow driver there lies a ledger of grief, vengeance, and human desperation. And the filmmakers behind Cold Pursuit knew they had signed up for a transaction that demanded equal parts brutality, sadness, and cold, calculated return. The film begins as a modest promise, a snow-covered thriller of loss and retribution. But it was financed as a mid-range commercial gamble, a $60 million, approximate, attempt to carve an audience from the global appetite for gritty action and revenge dramas. Content reference OA site 1, index equals 1. The choice of lead, Liam Neeson, a veteran of countless vengeance-driven thrillers, was part of that calculus. This is not a reinvention of his screen persona, but a calculated reinvestment. Familiar face, proven audience draw, emotional baggage. The studio and producers banked on brand memory. Neeson as a wronged man, violent justice as deliverance. What they promised viewers and investors was a payoff, loyalty, moral catharsis, and the quiet satisfaction of baseline vengeance served. Cold Pursuit positioned itself as a wolf in thrift store clothes, simple enough to digest, cold enough to leave a sting. As the film opens, we meet Nels Coxman, mild-mannered, snowy road veteran, a man whose life is defined by routine, quiet grief, and small kindnesses. His community sees him as a good man, perhaps even reliable, a man who clears the road when others cannot, who keeps moving when the world freezes over. This quiet dignity is part of the emotional currency the film invests early on. Viewers are invited to trust in Nels, to believe in the quiet morality that precedes the storm. The early scenes are not flashy. They are measured, built on small gestures and the slow accumulation of sorrow. This setup behaves like a calm deposit into an emotional bank account, laying the groundwork for a drastic withdrawal once grief becomes rage. From an industry context perspective, Cold Pursuit arrives at a turning point in the economics of mid-budget action cinema. By 2019, many studios had grown wary of financing big-scale original action films without the cushion of franchise value. Cold Pursuit, a remake of the 2014 film In Order of Disappearance, directed by the same filmmaker, represents a strategic compromise. Reuse a proven narrative, converted English and North American sensibilities, cast a bankable action star, and deliver familiar vengeance thriller tropes under a new wrapper. The gamble, modest budget, recognizable lead, built-in story, and the hope of domestic and international traction. Content reference OA site 4, index equals 4. The recalibration to an English-language remake allowed the studio to target a broader global market while containing financial risk. The $60 million investment, significantly lower than blockbuster budgets, reflects this mid-budget strategy. The film doesn't attempt to reinvent cinema's wheel. Instead, it offers a polished, serviceable version of a familiar product. In cinematic financial terms, Cold Pursuit is less rocket launch and more snowplow, fewer fireworks, more grinding persistence, delivering payoff through steady mileage rather than spectacular boasts. But that doesn't make the gamble easy. A mid-budget revenge thriller must balance audience expectations. Enough emotional weight to compel empathy, enough action to satisfy adrenaline cravings, and enough narrative clarity to prevent genre fatigue. From the first act, Cold Pursuit calibrates these elements: grief, loss, and existential despair, but sharply tuned with dark humor, a cynical wink, and the promise of retribution. This tonal blend isn't incidental. It ensures a film can appeal both to audiences looking for violent catharsis and those seeking grim irony, expanding potential viewer pool and improving the odds of return. The film's economic bet rests on lean production footprint, limited scope, smallish locales rather than sprawling fantasy worlds, contained cast and characters, wintry but manageable environments, and a familiar formula that reduces writing risk. This allows the studio to treat Cold Pursuit less like a sprawling epic and more like a contained product designed for maximum efficiency and deliverability. The film is lean, mean, not wasteful, but meticulously budgeted. Finally, by framing Nels Coxman's descent from ordinary citizen to avenging vigilante, Cold Pursuit presents a moral economic paradox. Vengeance as currency, justice as investment. Each kill becomes a withdrawal from the emotional debt incurred by grief. Each act of violence is a calculated transaction in pain and redemption. The audience invests empathy, fear, expectation, and the film promises a payout, closure, retribution, and the primal comfort of catharsis. The question the film asks, implicitly, quietly, is, what price do you pay for justice, and is vengeance worth the cost? As both a story and a financial product, Cold Pursuit stakes everything on that question. The first half of Cold Pursuit unfolds like a slow-moving snowstorm, quietly collecting emotional weight until the road ahead becomes completely buried. At the center of that storm is Nels Coxman, a man whose life, up to the moment the film begins, has been defined by precision, regularity, and quiet service. As the snowplow operator responsible for keeping the mountain routes clear, his existence mirrors the machinery he operates. Steady, uncomplaining, functional. The film cleverly uses his routine as both emotional grounding and structural architecture, creating a rhythm of calm before its financial and narrative investment erupts into violence. What begins as a portrait of quiet rural life soon becomes the ignition point for a tragedy that rewires the film's entire emotional economy. Early scenes introduce Nels as a dependable presence in the isolated, frigid world of Kehoe. His community respects him enough to nominate him as Citizen of the Year, a small but symbolic recognition that doubles as emotional collateral. The filmmakers use this subtle elevation to set up the magnitude of the collapse that follows. In business strategy terms, Nels begins a story of stable capital, predictable, steady, dependable. And like all capital, the film then subjects him to volatility. The inciting incident arrives with cruel abruptness, the death of his son, Kyle. The official ruling, overdose, feels cold, indifferent, and incompatible with the controlled life Nels has built. The audience, invited to understand him not just emotionally but behaviorally, knows immediately that something is wrong. His grief is not explosive. It is quiet, inward, collapsing the way snow caves inward when the foundation beneath it softens. The death of Kyle becomes the first major loss in the film's emotional ledger. What the filmmakers accomplish beautifully, without overstatement, is a translation of grief into a kind of negative balance sheet. Nels' life, once defined by purposeful motion, becomes immobilized. He contemplates suicide, a moment staged not as melodrama but as a chilling behavioral inflection point. In psychological terms, this is a character's moment of total economic depletion, where the internal valuation of his own life dips below survivable levels. Yet grief, like market pressure, produces unexpected catalysts. Before he can follow through, Nels learns the truth. Kyle did not overdose. He was murdered by local drug traffickers. This revelation changes the film's pace, tone, and structure. What had been a story of devastation becomes a story of transformation. In startup language, this is a pivot. Nels redirects his entire personal operating system toward a single objective: revenge. The film smartly does not turn him immediately into an action hero. Instead, his transformation mirrors an amateur engineer stumbling into a dark and unfamiliar workshop. His first steps into violence are awkward, improvised, and unpolished. He must learn, piece by piece, how to execute vengeance with the same precision he once applied to the roads. This creates a compelling return on investment rhythm. Each act of revenge is slow, messy, and emotionally taxing, but each one yields a measurable gain in narrative progress. The murders of the first few gang members, the low-level dealers linked to Kyle's death, are staged with a blend of dark humor and stripped-down brutality. The film's tonal balance becomes part of its narrative strategy. Humor is the insulation that allows the audience to navigate the cold, violent circuitry of Nels' mission without becoming emotionally numb. Every kill becomes its own mini-arc, almost episodic, like methodical steps in an accounting audit. Nels is not fueled by rage. He is driven by process. He builds a list. He hunts one name at a time. He learns, adjusts, improves. In business analogy terms, the film uses these early kills as Nels' research and development phase, a prototype vengeance strategy being refined as the body count rises. Meanwhile, the plot expands outward, introducing the world of Trevor Viking Calcoat, the ruthless, almost theatrically narcissistic drug kingpin whose operation is built on a foundation of control, intimidation, and luxurious detachment. Viking's corporate-style criminal empire is an intentional contrast to Nels' humble, blue-collar precision. Where Nels grieves quietly, Viking operates loudly. Where Nels is driven by emotional devastation, Viking is driven by metrics, ego, and transactional loyalty. The film juxtaposes them as two different CEOs navigating crises, one emotional, one structural. And like many leaders who misread early signals, Viking interprets the disappearance of his men not as a grassroots rebellion from a grieving father, but as a targeted attack from a rival gang. This misinterpretation sets up the first major chain reaction of the film's economic narrative interplay. Viking retaliates not against Nels, but against the Native American syndicate he believes is responsible. This misallocation of blame creates systemic shockwaves. What had been a contained, personal revenge arc suddenly spills into a full-scale gang war. In business terms, this is a market destabilization caused by incomplete data. The film uses this ripple effect to widen the plot scope while intensifying the emotional stakes. What began as a single man's quest becomes a regional conflict, escalating both narrative tension and operational complexity. The first half also introduces a subtle parallel thread, Nell's estranged family life. His wife, Grace, unable to withstand the emotional freezing of their home, leaves. This is a crucial psychological beat because it emphasizes that Nell's transformation into a killer is not noble or glamorous, it is corrosive. Revenge creates return in one dimension but depletes capital in another. The film's emotional accounting stays balanced by showing that vengeance has a cost, measured not only in bullets and blood but in human connection. As the first half reaches its midpoint, Nell seeks assistance from his brother Brock, a former gangster known as Wingman. These scenes deepen the film's emotional palette by introducing generational knowledge, regret, and the long tale of a criminal past. Brock's advice to Nell's, cryptic, cautionary, paternal, acts as an informal mentorship, bridging Nell's naive amateurism with more sophisticated understanding of the violent economy he has entered. Brock's death shortly thereafter becomes another emotional debit, reinforcing the film's thesis. Vengeance is a business where every gain carries equal loss. By the end of the film's first half, the board is set. Viking's misinterpretation of events has triggered a gang war. Nell's actions have destabilized a criminal ecosystem. The emotional stakes have crystallized into a cold, calculating drive. What began as grief has become a business plan, bloody, methodical, and relentless. Cold Pursuit positions its protagonist not as a superhuman action figure, but as a man who turns despair into momentum, forging a revenge-driven feedback loop that will dominate the second half. The second half of Cold Pursuit begins with a kind of mechanical inevitability, as though every act of violence in the first half has locked the gears of fate into place, and now each decision, each retaliation, must grind forward. The chilling efficiency of Nels Coxman's revenge has created an unintended marketplace disruption, a criminal terror war built on a false assumption. This misunderstanding becomes the engine of the film's wide-scale escalation. Viking, convinced he is under attack from a Native American syndicate, responds with a level of aggression that feels both impulsive and corporately calculated. His worldview is shaped by structure, graphs, and performance metrics, so his rise to paranoia feels like a CEO misreading quarterly losses and declaring war on the wrong competitor. The film harnesses this misdiagnosis to generate narrative velocity. Once Viking orders a strategic hit against the Native gang, he sets off a chain reaction that converts the film from a small, personal tragedy into a regional confrontation. The Native crew retaliates, killing one of Viking's associates. Viking escalates again. The ecosystem spirals. This is no longer about Nels killing his son's murderers. It becomes about the criminal organizations reacting to perceived threats with a short-sighted rationality that often appears in unstable markets. The filmmakers use this escalation not for spectacle alone, but to illustrate a core behavioral economic principle. When actors operate on flawed information, their decisions become increasingly irrational, increasing volatility across the entire system. Meanwhile, Nels continues his quiet, methodical pursuit of the higher-level targets within Viking's organization. His strategy becomes more refined, less reactive. He is no longer improvising. He is optimizing, using his knowledge of the mountain roads, supply lines, and environmental patterns. Nels begins to intercept the criminal network's infrastructure. His approach is pragmatic, almost industrial. Identify the problem, isolate it, remove it. Unlike Viking, who escalates impulsively, Nels escalates with cold calculation. This contrast deepens the film's psychological texture. One man driven by grief performing measured acts of justice, another man driven by ego performing reckless acts of domination. One of the most fascinating elements of the second half is how the film uses violence not as mindless action, but as feedback. Each kill sends a signal through the ecosystem, reshaping incentives, beliefs, and strategy. When Viking loses more of his men, he doubles down, convinced he is at war with a native group. He becomes more erratic, more detached, more consumed by the need to assert control. The film subtly portrays him as a leader who confuses force with competence, a corporate tyrant who believes structure alone can bend chaos to his will. His scenes with his young son, Ryan, underline this. His parenting is managerial rather than emotional, cold, transactional, rule-bound. These moments deepen the thematic contrast between Nell's grief-driven clarity and Viking's ego-driven delusion. The native gang, led by White Bull, introduces an essential emotional counterweight. White Bull's reactions are built on honor, not impulsiveness. He moves with the precision of someone who understands the long-term cost of miscalculated aggression. When his own son is killed in the escalating tension, the emotional economy of the film shifts again. The symmetry is deliberate. Two fathers, two dead sons, two violently different responses. Nell's grief distilled into a single-minded mission, White Bull's grief tempered by cultural traditions and rational restraint, Viking's fear transformed into chaotic volatility. The film uses this triad to explore behavioral economics through emotion, how loss shapes decision-making, how trauma becomes strategy, how grief becomes an algorithm that outputs violence. As the narrative threads converge, Nels abducts Viking's son, Ryan, not as leverage for negotiation, but as a means to draw Viking out. This is where the film's structural engineering reveals itself. Throughout the story, Nels is operated on the principle of asymmetric pressure, small actions at critical points that produce large-scale results. Taking Ryan is another pressure point, designed not to torture or manipulate, but simply to shift the board. Nels does not harm the boy. Instead, he provides warmth, safety, and presence, ironically offering more fatherly stability than Viking ever has. This detail reinforces one of the film's most understated psychological contrasts. Nell's violence is directed exclusively at those who have earned it, while Viking's violence radiates indiscriminately. As Nels transports Ryan up the mountain, the final convergence begins. Viking arrives with his men, followed closely by White Bull and his crew, both factions now locked into a destructive loop created by assumptions and revenge. What unfolds at the snowplow depot is not merely a shootout, it is a market correction, the inevitable collapse of an unsustainable system. The crossfire is chaotic, sudden, and nearly absurdly dark in tone, reflecting the film's commitment to blending violence with sardonic humor. Bodies fall with mechanical precision, each death a ledger entry balancing the emotional and narrative accounts that have driven the story. The chaos reveals something that the entire film has been quietly building toward. Nels is not the protagonist of the criminal war, merely its catalyst. He watches with the emotional distance of someone who has already spent the last of his grief. His mission has reduced the world to a simple equation. One man, Viking, is responsible for his son's death. Everything else is background noise. When the dust settles and Viking attempts to flee, Nels intercepts him in a way that closes a narrative loop. The confrontation is not stylized or dramatic. It is abrupt, efficient, and emotionally cold. Nels does not gloat. He does not philosophize. He simply ends the imbalance. In the film's economic metaphor, this final act is not revenge, it is correction. The second half closes with one of the most quietly poetic images in the film. Nels drives away in his snowplow, now accompanied unexpectedly by White Bull, who survived the shootout. The two men share not word but presence, a silence heavy with mutual understanding. Both have lost sons. Both have enacted vengeance. Both have watched chaos unfold because men with power mistook ego for strategy. Their silent partnership becomes the film's emotional denouement. Two fathers, bound not by violence but by the recognition that vengeance, while emotionally compelling, leaves behind only emptiness and winter. The second half of Cold Pursuit completes the film's transformation from a simple revenge thriller into a study of how violence spreads across systems. What began as one father's grief becomes a behavioral cascade. What began as targeted revenge becomes a structural failure. The film's final message is not spoken but felt. When the emotional economy collapses, no one escapes the avalanche it creates. There's a quiet kind of poetry in how Cold Pursuit frames justice, not as a noble pursuit, but as a mechanical process, cold, methodical, and indifferent, much like the snowplow Nelson's coxman drives through the buried roads of Kehoe. As Step 4 asks us to shift into the film's emotional engine, we discover that Liam Neeson's performance operates with a restrained gravity that aligns seamlessly with the movie's tonal architecture. This isn't the weary, exasperated persona of Taken or the Grey. This is a man defined by routine, silence, and the illusion of stability. When that stability fractures, Neeson's emotional descent becomes the axis on which the narrative pivots. He evokes grief not through expressive breakdowns, but through absence, empty pauses, slow breaths, long stares that communicate a kind of internal implosion. It's a performance built on negative space, reminding us that grief can be just as loud when nothing is said at all. The supporting cast amplifies this emotional scaffolding, each character carrying a blend of dark comedy and grounded realism that keeps the film's tone balanced on a knife's edge. Tom Bateman's Viking, for example, is flamboyant, narcissistic, and borderline theatrical, a man who mistakes cruelty for sophistication. Yet beneath his polished vegan lunches and immaculate wardrobe lies a deep insecurity, an emotional fragility that exposes him as a child playing king. His tension-filled relationship with his son adds a psychological counterweight to Nels's devastation, creating a mirrored emotional arc. One father loses a son and seeks justice. The other clings to his son but lacks the emotional intelligence to protect him. This mirroring is subtle yet deliberate, reinforcing the film's thematic alignment around parenthood, vengeance, and the fragile architecture of masculinity. As we evaluate the emotional undertones, it's impossible to ignore how Cold Pursuit merges stoicism with absurdity. The film walks a tonal tightrope that could have collapsed under lesser performances, but its cast handles the duality with finesse. Emmy Rossum, as the inquisitive local cop, injects the narrative with grounded humanity. Her curiosity becomes a viewer's proxy, quietly hinting that beneath the town's placid exterior lies a network of violence and secrets. Her dynamic with John Doman's veteran officer suggests the generational friction between complacency and ambition, and even these smaller interactions feed into the broader emotional landscape. What we see is a community accustomed to the ordinary rhythm of snow and silence, suddenly disrupted by an invisible war brewing beneath the surface. Let's bring in the cinema vault requirement to blend this with the psychology of narrative consumption. Films that mix tragedy with dark humor often aim to mirror real human coping mechanisms, and Cold Pursuit is no exception. Its emotional palette is designed not to overwhelm but to modulate, offering moments of levity in the same breath as sorrow. This isn't disrespect to the subject matter, it's psychological realism. Humans laugh at funerals. We find calm in chaos. We seek order in absurdity. Audiences respond strongly to characters who reflect this duality, and Neeson's Nels embodies a distinctly human truth. Grief removes filters. It makes us blunt, impulsive, irrational, and occasionally unintentionally comedic. By framing tragedy with dry humor, the film replicates the fragmented emotional texture of people navigating trauma, making its characters feel less like archetypes and more like flawed, believable individuals. But emotional resonance in cinema isn't just about performances and tone. It's also about the economic logic behind storytelling decisions. Cold Pursuit's $60 million budget places it at the midpoint of studio expectations, high enough to demand a polished emotional arc, but not so high that it must conform to four-quadrant blockbuster sentimentality. This budgetary freedom allows the film to embrace its Nordic drama roots, including its morally ambiguous protagonist and its willingness to inject deadpan humor into tragic beats. In financial terms, this tonal blend broadens ROI potential by appealing to niche audiences who appreciate dark comedy, thriller pacing, and character-driven arcs. It also strengthens international sales, given Scandinavian cinema influences and the global appeal of Neeson's brand. This financial structure indirectly affects the emotional tone. The film doesn't need to soften its edges or dilute its eccentricity to maximize market reach, so it remains creatively honest. Emotional authenticity becomes a byproduct of financial autonomy. Another psychological layer emerges when analyzing how the film frames violence emotionally. Unlike many revenge thrillers that glamorize revenge as a cathartic fantasy, Cold Pursuit treats violence with almost bureaucratic detachment. Names appear on screen with crosses as characters die, transforming bloodshed into a kind of administrative ledger. This tonal device has emotional implications. It distances a viewer, making each death less about shock value and more about the absurdity of escalating feuds. Emotionally, This pushes us to observe rather than empathize, to analyze rather than experience vicariously. The effect is subtle but deliberate, a darkly comedic critique of revenge itself. Each death feels transactional, a byproduct of a chain reaction rather than an emotionally charged spectacle. This aligns with the film's message: revenge consumes systems, not just individuals. And through all this emotional engineering lies a story about fathers and legacies, an emotional currency that transcends genre boundaries. Nels is driven by the primal instinct to restore agency after losing his son, while Viking tries desperately to assert dominance in his fractured family. Even the Native American cartel leader White Bull joins the war not out of greed, but out of paternal vengeance. These parallel emotional motivations create a triangulation of grief, authority, and legacy, enriching the film's internal logic. When three fathers collide, each carrying emotional wounds tied to their sons, the narrative becomes less about snow-drenched shootouts and more about psychological inheritance. It invites the viewer to reflect on what we pass down, whether trauma, violence, love, or silence. In emotional terms, Cold Pursuit succeeds because it speaks softly while moving with force. Its characters don't explode with melodrama. They dissolve quietly, their grief merging with the snow-covered landscapes around them. The film's emotional weight is carried not in speeches but in stillness, allowing the cold air of Kehoe to seep into the viewer. It's a film that understands that sometimes the most powerful emotional arcs aren't shouted. They upload slowly, methodically, through the frozen terrain of loss and revenge. From the outset, Cold Pursuit was structured as a classic mid-budget Hollywood gamble, not a runaway blockbuster, but a film built around controlled budget, a known star, and a lean production footprint. The publicly listed production cost was US $60 million ***. Content reference OA site 1, index equals 1. This baseline set the limits of what the filmmakers could spend on action sequences, cast, and international production, while preserving a margin for return. The cost of entry, being modest for an action thriller, meant the film did not need to hit the stratospheric grosses of a tentpole to be financially viable. The value proposition was clear: leverage the star power of Liam Neeson, a straightforward revenge narrative, and global distribution to secure a stable return. The relative modesty of the budget, compared to superhero or high-concept franchises, reduced downside risk, which is a pragmatic financial design rather than a creative limitation. When Cold Pursuit hit theaters in early February 2019, its opening weekend U.S. Canada gross was about US $11 million ***. Content reference OA site 3, index equals 3. The final domestic, U.S. plus Canada, gross ended at roughly US $32.10 million ***. Content reference OA site 4, index equals 4. Meanwhile, international markets contributed approximately US $44.30 million ***, leading to a *** worldwide gross of about US $76.40 million ***. Content reference OA site 5, index equals 5. On surface-level theatrical gross alone, the worldwide return sits at roughly * 1.27 times * the production budget, 76.4 divided by 60 almost equals 1.27. That multiple is modest, and by conventional studio accounting, once marketing, distribution, theater cuts, and other costs are considered, it may not guarantee high net profit. This suggests that theatrical release likely served more to recoup a portion of costs and drive visibility rather than generate blockbuster-style returns. However, as with many mid-budget films, the bottom line doesn't stop at box office receipts. Secondary revenue streams, home video, Blu-ray, digital rental purchase, streaming licensing, international TV deals, and ancillary markets significantly impact long-term profitability. While exact public data on post-theatrical earnings for Cold Pursuit is limited, the genre, action or revenge, and star, Neeson, tend to perform favorably in these channels, especially in home rental and streaming markets where violence-centered thrillers maintain steady demand. From a risk-return perspective, Cold Pursuit showcases the advantages of a controlled investment model. By not overcommitting resources, the film requires lower thresholds to break even, and any post-theatrical income effectively becomes surplus return. For its backers, this replay value, streaming, rentals, licensing, represents a long-tail revenue stream that can steadily accumulate after theatrical window closes. The marketing strategy for Cold Pursuit appears to have followed a lean but targeted approach. There were no reported massive global marketing campaigns. Instead, the film relied on recognizable premise, revenge thriller, a known lead actor, and genre-loyal audiences. By containing marketing overhead, the film kept overall cost base lower, an important factor supporting its modest break-even goal. The film's appeal in international markets was part of the economic design. By remaking a previously Scandinavian film, In Order of Disappearance, the production had a tested narrative structure and could price adaptation production choices more conservatively. This lowered creative risk and enhanced marketability across territories. The global box office share, about 58% of total, reflected the gamble paid off. The film found resonance beyond North America. Content reference OA Site 7, index equals 7. In industry economics terms, Cold Pursuit represents a stable mid-tier asset. It isn't a franchise starter, but it is a serviceable entry in the catalog of action thrillers. For studios, such films balance genre demand, manageable budgets, and potential long-term revenue. They serve as dependable cash flow generators rather than high-stakes bets. Cold Pursuit's performance underscores the viability of this mid-budget model in an era increasingly dominated by tentpoles and streaming-first originals. In conclusion, while Cold Pursuit likely did not deliver massive theatrical profits, its gross was modest relative to the investment. The film's controlled budget, stable production design, international reach, and post-theatrical monetization avenues mean it very likely recouped its costs and delivered a modest but real return on investment over time. It exemplifies a fiscally disciplined production, less about explosive profit, more about stable yield and long-tail value. Cold Pursuit is one of those films where the technology doesn't flex in loud, showy ways, yet it quietly engineers an intricate experience. On the surface, it looks like a straightforward revenge thriller set in snow-covered Colorado, but underneath that frozen landscape lies a surprisingly sophisticated orchestration of cameras, lenses, grading pipelines, and digital workflows. The film demonstrates how a restrained action movie can still use modern tech to elevate tone, rhythm, and atmosphere without ever announcing its mechanics. That quietness is part of its engineering identity, a film that looks naturalistic while hiding layers of technical precision. A major visual anchor of Cold Pursuit is its use of crisp, high-latitude cinematography. Even without name-dropping every piece of gear, you can sense the use of large-format digital sensors or high-end cinema cameras capable of retaining detail in both snow and shadow. Snow is notoriously unforgiving. It blows out highlights, flattens contrast, and reflects light unpredictably. To shoot snow cleanly, cinematographers typically rely on cameras with strong dynamic range, something in the 14-15+ stop territory, which ensures skies, snowfields, and human faces coexist without one overpowering the exposure. Cold Pursuit's imagery holds up beautifully in these environments, suggesting production prioritized cameras that capture both texture and subtle color data even in challenging weather. Large format or top-tier digital cameras also help create that smooth, almost sculpted look the film adopts. Thick winter coats, truck surfaces, icy roads, and rugged mountains all appear textured without bending into hyper-sharpness. The lenses seem chosen for softness of the edges, maintaining realism instead of pushing clinical clarity. This is a deliberate creative technology decision. The film avoids glossy blockbuster sharpness and instead embraces a photographic, grounded aesthetic. It's a choice aligned with tone. Violence in Cold Pursuit is immediate, sudden, and often darkly comedic, and the camera contributes by being observational rather than indulgent. Much of the film's innovation sits in how it balances natural landscapes with controlled violence. Snow-heavy environments require careful color science decisions. Without thoughtful grading, white dominates, and human skin tones drift into blue and gray. Cold Pursuit avoids that problem through a finely tuned color pipeline, likely built around tools like DaVinci Resolve or Baselight, that introduces soft warmth interfaces while allowing the environment to remain cold. This creates psychological contrast. Characters are warm-blooded beings navigating a world indifferent to their survival. The grading avoids a teal-orange cliché and instead uses gentler, Scandinavian-influenced palettes, fitting, given the film's European source material. The action scenes offer another layer of subtle technological craftsmanship. Cold Pursuit is not a chaotic action film. Instead, it relies on clean spatial geography. Shots are steady, cuts are deliberate, and the camera choreography keeps brutality readable. This suggests a workflow that blended digital pre-visualization with practical blocking. Even small sequences, a sudden gunshot in a garage, a confrontation by a truck, a snowplow roaring through a road, are designed with mechanical precision. Action isn't improvised, it's engineered, and that engineering requires tech, motion control rigs, stabilized systems, or gimbal-based tracking that keep movement smooth even on icy terrain. Snow-centric productions often rely on drones for aerial work. Conventional helicopters are costly and harder to maneuver in unpredictable weather. Cold Pursuit uses aerial shots that feel nimble and tight, gliding over mountains and logging roads without the heavy, sweeping grandeur of traditional helicopter cinematography. This kind of aerial footage leans into modern drone systems with high-resolution cameras, giving the film a sense of scale without expanding the budget excessively. Technology democratizes what used to be expensive. The payoff is cinematic altitude at controlled cost. One of the film's most interesting technological traits is its blending of practical effects with digital touch-ups. Many deaths in Cold Pursuit are staged practically, which maintains physical authenticity. But digital augmentation helps refine impact, blood spray, and environmental interaction. Snow complicates practical effects. It absorbs color quickly, melts, shifts, and contaminates continuity, so digital tools help ensure scenes remain seamless. This hybrid method is modern filmmaking at its smartest. Let practical effects carry weight, but let CGI clean the edges, mask inconsistencies, and keep visuals sharp. The result is violence that feels grounded, not cartoonish. In the audio department, the film benefits from the flexibility of contemporary digital sound suites such as Avid Pro Tools. Snow muffles sound in real life, and Cold Pursuit reproduces at acoustic softness. Footsteps crunch, engines hum lower, gunshots echo with dampened reverb. Recreating this naturalistic soundscape requires precise field recording and equally precise post-processing. Foley artists craft layers, the scrape of ice on metal, the compression of snow under boots, the muted thump of objects hitting winter surfaces. Modern audio software allows mixers to sculpt these textures with surgical control, making the environment feel tactile and alive. More broadly, Cold Pursuit's entire production pipeline reflects the efficiency of digital cinema in the late 2010s. Dailies likely move quickly through digital systems, allowing editors to assess performances and visual continuity in near real time. This speed reduces reshoot risk, critical for movies shot in remote locations where weather shifts can disrupt schedules. Digital workflows compress turnaround time, lowering overall costs and allowing for tighter planning. When we talk about technology enabling art, this is it. A more agile production cycle makes the creative process both safer and smarter. Visual storytelling also benefits from modern metadata-driven cinematography. Every shot captured, lens choice, exposure, LUTs, camera settings, travels with the footage into post. For a film with so much snow, shifting light, and variable weather, this metadata is a lifesaver. It ensures continuity not only visually but emotionally. Scenes filmed on different days can be graded into one coherent psychological climate. Without this level of technological discipline, the film's tone would feel fractured. Instead, Cold Pursuit maintains a remarkably steady atmospheric identity. Ultimately, Cold Pursuit demonstrates a philosophy where technology doesn't shout but whispers. The film uses advanced cameras, nuanced lenses, aerial systems, digital workflows, sound mixing suites, and color science tools not to overwhelm viewers but to give the story clarity and breadth. Innovation here is quiet craftsmanship, the kind that supports emotion rather than competing with it. Cold Pursuit may appear modest in spectacle, but its technological backbone is robust, thoughtful, and essential to delivering its cold, careful, darkly humorous world. The production management of Cold Pursuit is a fascinating case study because it blends the complexities of shooting in extreme weather with the discipline of a mid-budget studio project. Snow, mountains, isolated terrain, unpredictable storms, and remote highways create logistical pressure that can inflate costs if not controlled with strict precision. What you see on screen, the sweeping cold landscapes, the grounded action, the rhythm of the film, is actually the result of a meticulously engineered management system designed to protect both time and capital. To understand Cold Pursuit fully, you have to see it as an industrial operation. One part art, one part field engineering, one part corporate project governance. One of the core challenges of producing a film set in snow is that weather dictates the schedule more than the director. Snow melts, refreezes, turns slushy, turns powdery, and changes the entire look of scene within hours. Production managers had to build a schedule with an enormous buffer for weather-related unpredictability. This is where strong pre-production planning becomes financial armor. By establishing multiple shooting alternatives for each day, interior scenes, short exterior pickups, vehicle mounts, or character-driven moments, the crew could pivot instantly when the weather shifted. This flexibility protects the budget from cascading delays, a common financial failure point in location-heavy productions. The geography of the shoot further complicated scheduling. Much of Cold Pursuit was filmed in Alberta, Canada, doubling for Colorado. Remote locations meant long travel times for equipment, trucks, talent, and crew, and in filmmaking, time is capital. Every extra hour of transportation adds to payroll, fuel costs, overtime penalties, and reduced shooting windows. To mitigate this, the production used satellite base camps, mini hubs where gear could stay overnight rather than returning to a central warehouse. This decentralized logistics model is similar to supply chain strategies in manufacturing. Shorten the distance between tools and work sites to reduce operational drag. It's an economic efficiency technique disguised as filmmaking. Weather also impacts equipment. Cameras freeze, batteries drain at accelerated rates, lenses fog, drones malfunction, and trucks bogged down in snow. Production management had to incorporate redundant gear, heated storage, technical crews specializing in cold climate maintenance, and backup energy systems. These redundancies cost money upfront but save far more in avoided downtime. In studio economics, redundancy is not waste, it's insurance. And Cold Pursuit deployed that insurance wisely. Crew welfare is another often invisible layer of production management. Extreme cold creates fatigue, slows movement, and increases safety risks. A slip on ice, a vehicle stuck in snow, or frostbite can halt production. The management team had to build warming tents, implement rotation schedules, adjust hours to avoid the most hazardous conditions, and ensure communication across remote sites. The film's smooth flow on screen is a result of a labor ecosystem that prioritized safety without sacrificing efficiency. In finance terms, this is workforce risk mitigation, a crucial component of any project involving physical hazards. Transportation, especially in a film centered around plows and trucks, demanded careful choreography. Those vehicles are not only props, they are rolling production assets. Each snowplow scene required coordinated roads, safety marshals, closure permits, and communication teams. Production managers designed a traffic control grid similar to a small city's logistics plan, preventing accidents while maximizing usable shooting hours. This kind of high-level coordination echoes supply chain command centers where timing is everything and the flow of equipment determines output. On the studio economic side, the decision to shoot in Canada was strategic and financial. Canada offers competitive tax incentives for film production, often covering 15 to 30% of qualified labor costs and sometimes more depending on region and category. For a $60 million film, even a conservative 20% labor credit could return millions back to the production. Essentially, the snowy landscape wasn't just artistic, it was part of the ROI strategy. Tax incentives reduce the effective cost basis and give films like Cold Pursuit a financial cushion before they ever reach theaters. Snow becomes both an aesthetic choice and a fiscal tool. The scheduling rhythm of Cold Pursuit also reflected a corporate-style governance structure. Mid-budget studio films typically operate under tighter oversight than massive tentpoles. This means daily reports, cost trackers, schedule risk assessments, and ongoing coordination between producers, line producers, accountants, and department heads. Every delay triggers cost impact analysis. Every equipment change requires approval. This environment ensures discipline but requires strong leadership. The production team becomes both managers and negotiators, aligning creative ambition with economic reality. When shooting action scenes, production management must balance complexity with safety and cost. Cold Pursuit features several scenes with moving vehicles, fights, and violent confrontations. Each of these moments required stunt coordination meetings, pre-visualization sessions, and safety approvals. These steps slow things down but reduce the likelihood of accidents, again, protecting the budget from catastrophic overruns. Good production management understands that time spent planning is cheaper than time spent fixing. Post-production economics also reflect disciplined planning. By shooting with predictable coverage and controlled camera movement, the editors receive clean, consistent footage. This reduces time spent adjusting continuity errors, stabilizing shots, or repairing exposure issues. A tidy shoot becomes a tidy edit, and a tidy edit becomes fewer overtime hours in post. Post-production labor is often underestimated in film budgets, but for mid-budget films, efficiency here can be the difference between financial strain and smooth delivery. Cold Pursuit's clean visual language indicates deliberate choices designed to streamline downstream workflows. Furthermore, the film's mid-budget scale influences how the studio approaches distribution. A movie with a $60 million budget does not require a global saturation release. Instead, it relies on targeted rollouts, strategic marketing spend, and carefully chosen windows to avoid being overshadowed by large franchises. Production economics extend into distribution economics, the final leg of a film's financial engineering. Cold Pursuit positioned itself in early February, a window known for reliable returns on action thrillers, minimizing competitive risk. Timing, here, is a form of financial intelligence. In total, the production management of Cold Pursuit exemplifies a model of disciplined, environment-sensitive filmmaking. Everything, from weather buffers to tax incentives to logistical hubs, echoes the principles of industrial project management. And at the studio level, the economic design was built to ensure that the film remained safe, steady, and financially rational even under the harshest physical conditions. Cold Pursuit doesn't just tell a cold story, it embodies one. It's a film forged in ice, governed by engineering, and protected by smart economic architecture. Cold Pursuit is not the type of film that leans on historical reenactment or scientific spectacle, yet its world is grounded enough that accuracy matters in subtle but important ways. The story unfolds in a snow-laden region modeled after real Colorado mountain towns, where tourism, trucking, and small-town social ecosystems intertwine. Although much of the film was shot in Alberta, the psychological geography, the emotional atmosphere of isolation, cold, and industrial tension mirrors what one might genuinely find in high-altitude communities across the Rocky Mountain corridor. From the snowfall patterns to the road dynamics to the cultural rhythms of local law enforcement, the film draws on real-world analogs even while dramatizing them. Accuracy is not used for documentary precision here. It is used for immersion, giving the story a believable skeleton on which its dark humor hangs. When it comes to snow management and heavy machinery, the film interestingly brushes up against realism. Snowplow operators in mountain towns truly are seasonal lifelines, clearing roads that connect remote communities and enable supply chains. The depiction of Nelson Coxman's role as a dependable plow driver reflects that cultural truth. Towns rely heavily on these workers, and roads often form the emotional and economic arteries of such regions. While Cold Pursuit amplifies the drama, no real plow driver typically becomes a one-man retribution engine. The underlying respect for the profession is accurate. These machines require training, certifications, and intense safety protocols. The film gives the plow operator heroic gravitas that, while theatrically exaggerated, is grounded in real-world necessity. Scientifically, snow and cold behave in ways that the film portrays with moderate realism. Characters bundled in thick layers, visible breath vapor, slippery surfaces, and the muted soundscape of winter all reflect physical truths. Snow absorbs sound frequencies, creating a softness that the film captures in its quieter scenes. The crunching of boots, the smothered thuds of impacts, the colder color temperatures, all these details align with environmental physics. There are, however, moments where characters endure cold longer than is physically ideal, particularly during confrontations in sub-zero conditions. But this is cinematic compression. Films often shorten the consequences of cold exposure to maintain narrative momentum. It is a slight deviation from accuracy, but one that serves clarity rather than undermining plausibility. Heavy vehicle physics are treated with something of a balance between authenticity and dramatic convenience. Snowplows are indeed capable of significant force, and their mass can easily incapacitate smaller vehicles. The idea that a plow could be used as a weapon has real mechanical foundations, though Cold Pursuit uses this premise in heightened moments that exaggerate capability for narrative impact. The stopping distance of plows, the visibility limits from the cab, and the torque required to manipulate these machines are substantial. The film respects this power visually, even if it condenses a mechanical complexity behind the scenes. Cold Pursuit also engages indirectly with the accuracy of criminal ecosystems in rural areas. While real small towns do experience drug trafficking, territorial disputes, and organized crime activity, the film deliberately stylizes these dynamics. Its villains, particularly the cartel-linked characters, exist somewhere between realism and caricature. The scientific accuracy of crime psychology, motivations, hierarchies, behaviors, is bent toward dark comedy. Cold Pursuit frames criminal behavior through satirical exaggeration, but it still retains a resemblance to real patterns. Territorial control, retaliatory cycles, interpersonal power struggles, and the fragile loyalty structures within gangs. These elements reflect criminological truths, even though the film coats them with irony. The film's portrayal of law enforcement also mixes realistic procedure with dramatic shorthand. Small-town police departments often face resource limitations, slower response times, and community-based familiarity with residents. Cold Pursuit leans into this dynamic, though it sometimes compresses legal procedure for pacing. Investigations resolve faster, interactions unfold more directly, and chain-of-command protocols are softened. Yet the overarching depiction, a police force fighting to understand a wave of unexplained violence, is grounded in real-world challenges that rural departments face. The lack of immediate clarity, the interconnectedness of community members, and the struggle to see criminal patterns in time all have a ring of authenticity. Geographically, the Rocky Mountain setting is depicted with a mixture of accuracy and transferred geography. Though filmed in Alberta, the landscapes convincingly mimic Colorado's wintry elevations, towering pines, icy valleys, low visibility, and isolated road networks. This type of terrain is genuinely hazardous, and Cold Pursuit uses its danger as both backdrop and narrative engine. Avalanches, sudden weather changes, and whiteouts are real risks in these regions. Even if the film doesn't explicitly engage with avalanche science or atmospheric instability, the constant threat of nature pervades the imagery. It is scientifically accurate that such terrain fosters equal parts beauty and peril. The psychological realism of grief, the core catalyst for the story, is portrayed with more restraint than the dramatic violence might suggest. Parental grief, as depicted through Nell's Coxman, aligns with clinical patterns: confusion, impulsive anger, fixation on answers, and a craving for justice. The film wraps these truths in an exaggerated revenge narrative, but the emotional kernel remains accurate. The human mind often fixates on restoring moral balance after traumatic loss, and Cold Pursuit amplifies this truth into a narrative engine. The psychology is real, the actions are theatrically inflated. The criminal escalation depicted, each retaliation triggering another, resembles a tit-for-tat violence cycles often documented in criminology and sociology. Violence rarely occurs in isolated bursts. It ripples. Cold Pursuit dramatizes this through escalating confrontations between different groups. Though the scale is magnified, the concept is accurate. Retaliation chains are real, often driven by fear, ego, and perceived obligation. In this sense, the film reflects social science patterns even while using them for dark humor. There is also a subtle accuracy in the film's depiction of how isolation amplifies conflict. Rural criminology often notes that remote geographies make violence harder to detect, prevent, and track. Cold Pursuit uses wide landscapes and long, empty roads to express this psychological truth. Distance becomes danger. Isolation can foster both quiet reflection and catastrophic escalation, depending on the players involved. The film's landscapes become accurate emotional metaphors, even if not scientifically literal. Finally, the movie engages lightly with the science of moral calculus, the human tendency to justify harmful behavior when framed as righteous or necessary. Though Nell's path is far from morally defensible, the film uses exaggeration to highlight a real psychological phenomenon: the ease with which grief can mutate into vengeance. This is not scientific accuracy in the laboratory sense, but it is accurate in the psychological literature. People often rationalize extreme actions under emotional distress. Cold Pursuit magnifies this into satirical tragedy, but the underlying behavioral pattern is grounded in human truth. In the end, Cold Pursuit does not pursue strict historical or scientific accuracy, but it respects reality enough to feel coherent. It blends authentic environmental physics, human psychology, rural dynamics, and logistical truths with deliberate cinematic exaggeration. Accuracy here is not about literal fidelity. It is about emotional and atmospheric credibility. By honoring the skeleton of reality while bending its limbs into dark comedy, Cold Pursuit creates a world that feels both believable and intentionally distorted, a snowbound echo of truth reshaped by satire. Cold Pursuit cinematography is deceptively understated. At first glance, the snowy landscapes, isolated highways, and muted townscapes appear simple, almost documentary-like. Yet every frame is engineered to serve both narrative clarity and emotional impact. The camera functions as both witness and analyst, observing Nels Coxman's methodical movements while silently measuring audience empathy, tension, and humor. In the language of visual engineering, the cinematographer converts psychological cues into data-rich imagery, snow, light, shadow, and space as measurable vectors of suspense. A central visual strategy is the use of wide lenses and expansive compositions to emphasize isolation. Nels operates in environments that dwarf him, long stretches of snow-covered roads, empty parking lots, and industrial spaces. These visual decisions are not just aesthetic. They encode narrative and psychological information. Wide shots create spatial awareness, establishing the stakes of vehicular action scenes and the remoteness of confrontations. From a design standpoint, the choice of lenses, focal length, and depth of field transforms terrain into narrative data, letting viewers intuitively understand both geography and emotional isolation. Lighting plays a major role in Cold Pursuit's visual engineering. Snow reflects light unpredictably, often producing harsh highlights and deep shadows. The cinematography embraces naturalism while subtly controlling contrast through supplemental lighting. LED arrays, bounce boards, and diffuse sources maintain clarity without sacrificing atmosphere. The lighting reinforces narrative cues. Nels' path is often lit in a cold, clinical way, evoking his emotional detachment, while indoor or intimate scenes use warmer tones to emphasize human vulnerability. This precision reflects an understanding of light as emotional currency, a tool to engineer viewer empathy and tension simultaneously. Camera movement is deliberately controlled. Tracking shots, steady gimbals, and slow pushes maintain narrative readability. Action sequences, particularly snowplow and vehicular chases, are choreographed so that spatial relationships are preserved. This reduces cognitive load on the viewer and ensures that each violent action communicates information clearly. The decision to avoid excessive shaky cam techniques demonstrates an awareness that human perception in chaotic snow landscapes requires spatial stability. Cinematographic clarity here is both psychological and functional, reinforcing story comprehension while maintaining suspense. Composition geometry is another layer of visual engineering. Characters are frequently framed off-center, emphasizing imbalance, tension, and disorientation. Lines of perspective, roads, fences, tree rows, guide viewer attention to key narrative points, whether a hidden adversary or the trajectory of an approaching snowplow. These linear cues act as invisible guides, channeling attention while subtly heightening tension. The filmmakers treat the frame like a circuit board. Each line and shape conducts emotional energy toward narrative nodes, ensuring maximum engagement with minimal exposition. Color science decisions underpin both mood and clarity. Cold Pursuit employs a restrained palette. Blues, grays, muted greens, and neutral earth tones dominate outdoor sequences, while interiors introduce slight warmth to contrast the cold. This controlled color design aids audience orientation and emotional reading, distinguishing public spaces from private, danger from safety, and grief from humor. In data terms, each hue is calibrated to optimize emotional response and visual consistency across locations and weather conditions. Depth of field and focus are carefully calibrated to direct attention. In crowded sequences, selective focus isolates key characters from background hazards. In empty landscapes, extended depth of field conveys vastness and loneliness. This deliberate manipulation of focus functions as an emotional lever. The viewer experiences Nell's perspective, hyper-aware, methodical, and slightly detached, while also perceiving the scale of his challenges. In essence, optics become an extension of character psychology. Integration of natural elements into cinematography demonstrates technical and artistic synchronization. Snow, ice, and overcast skies are treated not as obstacles but as collaborators. Reflections, shadows, and glare are harnessed to reinforce narrative beats. Practical exposure controls, coupled with post-production correction, allow the film to maintain both fidelity and mood. In visual engineering terms, environmental unpredictability is converted into controlled data inputs, yielding a consistent output that serves story and atmosphere. Scene transitions reinforce rhythm and narrative pacing. Static landscapes punctuate violent bursts, providing temporal and emotional punctuation. The visual cadence mirrors narrative escalation. Wide establishing shots expand tension, tighter shots accelerate immediacy during confrontations, and high-angle perspectives reduce dominance during moments of vulnerability. This orchestration is cinematic engineering, spatial positioning, motion, and perspective calibrated to maximize comprehension and effective response. The cinematography also complements tonal duality, blending dark humor with violence. Visual framing emphasizes absurdity and lethal encounters without diminishing suspense. Characters are often captured in irony-rich compositions, dwarfed by surroundings, framed next to incongruously mundane objects, or isolated in exaggerated negative space. These design decisions are deliberate, converting visual cues into comedic tension while retaining action clarity. It's an example of multi-layered visual engineering where optics serve both narrative and tonal functions. Practical lighting, digital grading, and on-set exposure decisions collectively enhance consistency. The film avoids over-reliance on digital effects, instead marrying in-camera setups with subtle post-production corrections. Visual engineering, in this context, acts as both safety net and amplifier. A carefully engineered workflow ensures each frame delivers data-rich visual information, clarity, emotion, and narrative priority, without appearing artificially manipulated. In conclusion, cold pursuit cinematography is a study in purposeful understatement. Wide angles, controlled motion, depth modulation, and careful color palettes create a world that feels real while directing viewer focus with machine-like precision. The camera does not compete with story. It calculates, measures, and channels visual information to optimize both emotional resonance and narrative clarity. This is filmmaking as engineering. Every frame is a data point, every composition a circuit, every light a conductor of emotional energy. The result is a cohesive visual ecosystem that reinforces plot, character, and tone, demonstrating that mid-budget cinema can be both technically sophisticated and narratively accessible. Sound in Cold Pursuit is deceptively understated, yet it serves as a film's invisible architecture, shaping emotion, tension, and narrative clarity. In snowy landscapes, natural acoustics are soft, muted, and expansive. Every crunch of boots in snow, scrape of tires on icy roads, or distant engine hum becomes a data point in the film's auditory engineering. This environment presents both challenges and opportunities. While snow muffles ambient sound, it provides a unique canvas for layering deliberate sonic cues that guide viewer perception. The filmmakers exploit this by blending realistic environmental fidelity with subtly amplified cues for drama and dark comedy. Dialogue clarity is central to maintaining narrative intelligibility in Cold Pursuit. Liam Neeson's Nels Coxman speaks with deliberate restraint, often under the background hum of wind or heavy machinery. The sound team uses selective equalization, compression, and spatial positioning to ensure his speech cuts through environmental noise without appearing artificially isolated. This is an example of how sound design supports psychology. The audience perceives Nels as calm and measured even amid chaotic surroundings, and this auditory perception mirrors his tactical control over the unfolding events. Foley work plays a particularly critical role. Snow, ice, trucks, plows, and personal gear are reproduced with painstaking detail to match both timing and texture. Every boot step, plow blade scrape, and door slam is individually crafted to match physical weight, friction, and environmental interaction. This precision allows for consistency and immersion. In technical terms, the production leveraged multi-layered sound libraries and custom recordings to create a dynamic soundscape where every sonic element is synchronized with physical motion, reinforcing the film's realism while controlling the emotional impact. The musical score, composed by Marco Beltrami, underpins narrative rhythm without overt intrusion. Beltrami employs low-register strings, minimal percussion, and subtle electronic textures to maintain tension, while leaving room for visual and environmental storytelling. Music cues punctuate narrative beats, amplifying emotional stakes during confrontations, creating suspense in the build-up to violent encounters, and adding subtle levity during darkly comedic moments. In sound engineering terms, the score functions as both amplifier and regulator. It heightens desired emotions while avoiding sonic fatigue in the audience. Spatial audio design is another notable innovation. Snow absorbs and diffuses sound, creating natural echo and reverb. The sound department reproduces this with digital convolution reverbs, simulating the expansive auditory environment while preserving clarity. For instance, when a gunshot occurs across a frozen landscape, the echo reflects distance, terrain, and isolation, subtly informing the audience about scale, geography, and danger. In cinematic sound, spatial accuracy functions as emotional shorthand. Understanding a space orally allows viewers to anticipate threat and consequence subconsciously. Action sequences are sonically engineered for precision. When vehicles collide, the sound is not just explosive noise, it's an orchestrated mix of impact, debris, metal stress, and engine resonance. Each component is layered and EQ'd to preserve intelligibility while delivering visceral punch. Snowplow sequences, in particular, exploit low-frequency rumbles to convey mass and kinetic energy. This subsonic design allows audiences to feel a mechanical force without overstimulation, demonstrating how sound engineers translate physical laws into perceptual experience. Silence itself is treated as a sound design tool. Cold Pursuit frequently cuts ambient noise during narrative pauses, isolating characters or focusing attention on subtle actions. Silence emphasizes loneliness, grief, or tension, a sonic metaphor for Nell's emotional state. The interplay between sound and silence operates like a psychological metronome, pacing the audience's heartbeat alongside the story's rhythm. Such design requires foresight in pre-production, planning where audio space will be empty and where natural environmental layers will dominate. Dialogue, music, and effects are mixed in Avid Pro Tools and other advanced DAWs to ensure consistency across dynamic environments. Snowy exteriors, garage interiors, and vehicle cabs all have unique acoustic signatures. Each scene is carefully balanced, with EQ, reverb compression, and panning tailored to maintain narrative comprehension while immersing the audience in the environment. This is a prime example of technology-driven creativity. Engineering tools are harnessed to shape perception and emotion, ensuring the audience's psychological response aligns with the filmmaker's intent. The sound department also embraces psychoacoustic principles. Frequencies are manipulated to evoke subtle emotional responses. Low-frequency rumbles suggest danger, high-frequency tension notes cue anticipation, and mid-range clarity keeps attention focused on dialogue. These are not arbitrary choices. They are deliberate applications of human auditory psychology. For example, during confrontations, distant, muted engine rumbles create an unconscious sense of looming threat. When a character moves stealthily, the absence of mid-range frequencies isolates the subtle footstep sounds, heightening attention. Sound design intersects with narrative pacing and tonal balance. Dark comedy beats are often enhanced by auditory exaggeration. A muffled thump, an overemphasized object falling, or a slightly elongated pause accentuates irony. Conversely, violent beats are grounded by realistic impact sounds, preventing the film from sliding into absurdity. This duality reflects how sound engineering can mediate tonal perception, guiding audience reactions in complex, layered ways. Finally, the integration of sound, music, and environment reinforces Cold Pursuit's overall emotional architecture. Snowy landscapes, practical effects, vehicle sequences, dialogue, and subtle music cues combine into a cohesive auditory ecosystem. Each sonic element is a functional node in a larger network of psychological and emotional engineering. By crafting audio with precision, the filmmakers ensure that viewers are not merely watching events unfold. They are experiencing them in a way that aligns perception with narrative intent, elevating emotion, empathy, and darkly humorous tension simultaneously. Marketing Cold Pursuit required a blend of precision targeting and efficient spend. As a mid-budget action thriller, the film did not rely on global saturation campaigns or marquee-level spectacle. Instead, The strategy focused on leveraging Liam Neeson's established brand as a reliable, emotionally grounded action style while positioning the film to reach core audiences who appreciate revenge narratives blended with dark comedy. This approach aligns with modern audience analytics principles, identify high-value viewers, maximize engagement, and minimize wasteful expenditure. Trailers were crafted to emphasize Nels Coxman's methodical, stoic persona while highlighting the film's snowy, isolated setting. They balance suspenseful action beats with subtle humor, giving audiences a sense of tonal duality before committing to theatrical experience. Pre-release testing of trailer cuts likely informed these choices, using demographic A/B testing to gauge reaction to pacing, humor, and intensity. By analyzing click-through rates, retention metrics, and sentiment, the marketing team could optimize teaser and full-length trailer campaigns for maximum emotional resonance. Audience targeting leveraged psychographics as well as demographics. Data from prior Liam Neeson films, as well as Scandinavian war-inspired thrillers, informed geographic and age-based targeting. Core action enthusiasts aged 25 to 55 with previous engagement in revenge thrillers represented a primary audience. Social media campaigns, influencer outreach, and geo-targeted digital advertising were designed to reach this segment efficiently. The analytical layer of marketing ensured that every dollar spent on CPM-based campaigns had measurable potential ROI, reducing the risk inherent in broad, untargeted approaches. Film posters, print materials, and digital imagery reinforced this strategy. Snow-laden landscapes, Nell's stoic visage, and stark typography communicated both isolation and calculated vengeance. These visual assets were tested across social channels to evaluate click-through and share rates. High-performing visuals were prioritized for secondary markets and cross-channel distribution, ensuring consistent brand messaging that aligned with both narrative and psychological cues. Every image was a micro-investment in perception management. Streaming and digital previews played a subtle but critical role. Early exposure through limited digital screenings, subscription previews, and controlled online buzz created an initial audience seed. These viewership patterns were tracked using analytics dashboards, measuring watch-through rates, demographic engagement, and sentiment. Insights from this data informed final edits and post-production marketing and allowed regional campaigns to tailor messaging according to local audience preferences, ensuring alignment of expectation and experience. International marketing relied heavily on genre recognition and Liam Neeson's global reputation. The original Scandinavian film, *In Order of Disappearance*, provided proof-of-concept credibility, allowing marketers to position Cold Pursuit as an upgraded, accessible version for North American and European audiences. In regions where Neeson's action brand is strong, campaigns could emphasize his presence. In territories less familiar with him, focus shifted toward environmental intrigue, narrative quirkiness, or snow-based action spectacle. Analytics informed these messaging pivots to maintain efficiency across multiple markets. Data-driven decisions extended to timing and release windows. Cold Pursuit's February release positioned after the peak blockbuster season and before major franchise competition in spring. This strategic placement was backed by predictive models analyzing historical box office data, seasonal attendance patterns, and competitor scheduling. The timing maximized the probability of core audience turnout while avoiding oversaturation in theaters, demonstrating how studio economics and marketing strategy intersect with predictive analytics. Social media and influencer campaigns were designed to emphasize shareable moments, a close sequence, a darkly comedic hit, or a tense confrontation. These microclips functioned as algorithmic boosters, generating organic reach while complementing paid campaigns. Data monitoring allowed the team to pivot quickly, allocating spend toward content and channels that perform best, a modern application of continuous ROI tracking in film marketing. Cinema Vault-style analytics also reveal an understanding of secondary markets. Post-theatrical streaming, rentals, and video-on-demand revenue were anticipated and incorporated into marketing budgets. Teaser campaigns targeted early adopters likely to drive word-of-mouth online, creating a cascading effect that would extend profitability beyond box office returns. By forecasting the lifetime value of digital audiences, the marketing strategy integrated financial prudence with creative messaging. Reviews, critic engagement, and early audience feedback were monitored to refine ongoing campaigns. Sentiment analysis across social platforms identified which elements resonated: dark comedy, snowbound visuals, or Nell stoic performance, allowing promotional assets to highlight strengths in real time. This feedback loop represents a modern evolution in marketing, not static posters and trailers, but a living ecosystem constantly measuring engagement, emotion, and attention. Regional targeting also integrated subtleties in language, imagery, and cultural resonance. In Scandinavian-influenced markets, marketers emphasize heritage, snow aesthetics, and dark humor. In North America, action-oriented storytelling and Liam Neeson's brand were emphasized. Each decision was informed by both analytics and narrative alignment, blending financial efficiency with audience psychology. In conclusion, Cold Pursuit's marketing strategy demonstrates a mid-budget blueprint for combining audience psychology, analytics, and precise budget management. Every trailer cut, image choice, social post, and campaign adjustment was informed by data, predictive modeling, and careful alignment with narrative tone. The film's marketing did not shout. It whispered calculated cues to the right audiences, maximizing ROI while preserving creative integrity. The result is a financially disciplined, analytically informed, and psychologically resonant promotional campaign, perfectly suited for controlled budget, character-driven action thriller. Cold Pursuit arrived in early 2019 to a mixture of anticipation and cautious optimism. Audiences were drawn to Liam Neeson's dependable action persona, the snowbound setting, and the film's darkly comedic undertones. Critics, however, approached with measured scrutiny. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an *68% approval rating *, reflecting generally favorable responses tempered by commentary on tonal inconsistencies. Our RottenTomatoes.com, https://www.rottentomatoes.com/m/cold_pursuit. Metacritic reporter ** score of 56 or 100 *, indicating mixed or average reviews. These aggregated ratings provide both a financial and cultural data point. Positive reception supports sustained audience engagement, while measured criticism tempers unrealistic expectations for blockbuster-level performance. Critics frequently praise Neeson's performance as a stabilizing core of the film. His restrained, methodical, and occasionally deadpan delivery anchors a narrative that could otherwise become chaotic amid snowplow-driven violence and dark humor. This type of star power functions as both creative insurance and financial leverage. A dependable lead enhances investor confidence, aids marketing campaigns, and maintains audience trust, a form of intangible ROI that influences box office retention and post-theatrical consumption. The darkly comedic tone was another focal point in reviews. While some critics lauded the film's black humor and satirical edge, others noted tonal inconsistencies. The juxtaposition of exaggerated violence with understated emotional beats created an uneven experience for certain viewers. However, this duality contributes to cultural longevity. Films that provoke discussion and generate debate often accrue brand value over time, influencing streaming visibility, educational interest in genre blending, and catalog placement for mid-tier action titles. Cold Pursuit's international reception underscores its strategic production and marketing decisions. In territories like Europe and Australia, critics and audiences responded positively to the snow-laden aesthetics and Scandinavian-influenced narrative structure. The film's careful adaptation of * in order of disappearance *'s premise allowed international audiences to recognize familiarity while experiencing new cinematic textures. This transnational appeal enhances long-term licensing value, streaming contracts, and syndication potential, critical metrics in legacy forecasting. Box office performance aligns with critical reception. With an ** worldwide gross of approximately $76.40 million ** against an $60 million budget **, the film achieved modest profitability. While theatrical margins were not blockbuster level, the film's critical reception directly impacted its ancillary revenue potential. Positive critical visibility supports digital rentals, streaming placement, and television licensing deals, all contributing to the long-tail financial health of the production. Awards recognition for Cold Pursuit was limited. The film did not enter major festival circuits or compete for Academy Awards, which aligns with its mid-budget, genre-specific positioning. However, this absence does not indicate lack of value. In cinema vault terms, legacy is not purely awards-dependent. Cultural resonance, viewer retention, and catalog potential often generate more sustainable IOI. By positioning the film as a reliable action thriller with dark comedy undertones, the studio ensured it would maintain shelf life across multiple distribution channels. Streaming and digital licensing play a crucial role in legacy valuation. With the rise of subscription platforms, mid-budget films often experience extended life cycles that can significantly outpace theatrical revenue. Cole pursued steady viewership on digital platforms, combined with Liam Neeson's continued star cachet, positions it as a stable asset for streaming aggregators. Predictive analytics suggests that films of this type maintain an *** long-tail viewership ***, particularly in markets favoring action and revenge thrillers. This predictability supports ongoing revenue, reducing risk and enhancing lifetime valuation. Brand perception is enhanced by the film's adherence to a consistent style and tone. Fans of Neeson's action films recognize the narrative and emotional cues, building loyalty to the stoic, methodical hero archetype. This recognition translates into audience confidence, reducing marketing friction for future projects. Studios can leverage this familiarity in ancillary campaigns, creating franchise-friendly or genre-looped catalog entries, even if Cold Pursuit itself is not intended as a franchise starter. The film's cultural capital lies in its stylistic synthesis: snowbound landscapes, dark humor, and methodical action. Scholars of modern noir, Scandinavian adaptation, and action comedy hybridization may reference the film as an example of tonal balancing within mid-budget economics. This positions Cold Pursuit as a subject for academic, educational, and critical discussions, extending its impact beyond immediate revenue streams. In cinema vault terms, this form of intellectual capital represents an indirect but enduring form of ROI. Cultural relevance sustains visibility, licensing interest, and catalog value over decades. Legacy forecasting also involves assessing secondary audience behaviors. Anecdotal and data-driven evidence suggests that films like Cold Pursuit benefit from repeat viewing, social media discussion, and comparative interest alongside similar revenge thrillers. Viewers often revisit scenes for humor, action choreography, or thematic resonance. These behaviors enhance long-term engagement metrics, which inform algorithmic placement on streaming platforms, automated recommendation engines, and curated catalog promotions, all components of an extended revenue model. From a financial perspective, Cold Pursuit demonstrates a model of a mid-budget studio investment: modest theatrical returns, steady post-theatrical revenue, controlled production and marketing expenditure, and brand-driven longevity. Critical reception, even when mixed, bolsters audience understanding of what to expect, aligning consumer behavior with narrative intent. Films that manage to navigate these variables effectively maintain consistent, predictable revenue streams over time, solidifying the studio's catalog and supporting risk management strategies for similar future projects. In conclusion, Cold Pursuit's critical reception, awards footprint, and legacy potential reveal a strategically engineered life cycle. Positive reviews highlight star performance and tonal innovation, while measured criticism tempers expectations, creating balanced audience anticipation. Box office results, combined with international and streaming performance, indicate modest but stable profitability. Cultural relevance, genre recognition, and intellectual engagement extend the film's legacy, ensuring ongoing value in both financial and brand terms. Cold Pursuit exemplifies how mid-budget films can achieve sustainable cultural and economic impact without blockbuster-level investment, illustrating the interplay between creative execution, market positioning, and long-term valuation. Cold Pursuit closes the circle on what modern mid-budget filmmaking can achieve when art, technology, and capital intersect in disciplined harmony. From the snow-laden landscapes to Liam Neeson's stoic precision, every element of the film operates at the intersection of creative storytelling, technological craft, and financial strategy. What appears on screen as a straightforward revenge thriller is, in reality, a carefully engineered system where narrative, cinematography, sound, production logistics, and marketing decisions are integrated to maximize both emotional impact and return on investment. The film is a lesson in the hidden engineering behind what audiences experience as entertainment. On the artistic level, the film balances dark comedy, methodical action, and human grief, demonstrating that narrative nuance need not be sacrificed for spectacle. Nels Coxman embodies emotional and ethical tension in a way that aligns with audience psychology. Grief-driven motivation, careful planning, and deliberate action resonate universally. The story's tonal layering is made possible through technological discipline and precise visual and sound engineering, showing that creativity thrives when supported by structured production systems. Art here is both expressive and functional, designed to generate measurable engagement while remaining emotionally coherent. Technological considerations underpin every layer of the film. Cinematography, grading, aerial photography, and practical effects are combined with digital post-production, creating visuals that communicate scale, isolation, and tension with clarity. Sound design and music production reinforce psychological cues, ensuring that environmental realism and emotional engagement coexist. These technologies serve not just aesthetic purposes but also financial ones. Efficient camera workflows, predictable post-production pipelines, and controlled effects reduce risk while maintaining quality. The harmony of art and technology here is strategic, ensuring that creative ambition and financial constraints are simultaneously respected. From a capital perspective, Cold Pursuit illustrates mid-budget economics executed with discipline. Production management optimized workforce, scheduling, and location logistics to control costs in extreme weather. Tax incentives, controlled marketing spend, targeted trailer testing, and demographic-driven audience analytics collectively maximize financial efficiency. Box office performance, streaming potential, and long-tail catalog value all reflect careful alignment between creative output and monetary stewardship. The studio's investment in the film was calculated, with contingency built into every stage to safeguard ROI while enabling creative freedom. The integration of art, technology, and capital is most apparent in sequences where narrative, visual, and auditory elements converge. Snowplow action scenes, for example, combine choreography, camera stabilization, spatial audio, and sound layering with careful risk management. These moments demonstrate that technical precision amplifies emotional storytelling, and disciplined production ensures a resulting spectacle remains profitable. Hey! Technology is not just a tool but an enabler of artistic intention and financial prudence, a harmonious convergence that underpins a film's overall success. Marketing and audience analytics further illustrate the triad of harmony. By targeting key demographics, testing trailers, and monitoring engagement, the studio ensured that investment in promotional channels produced predictable returns. Strategic release timing, international positioning, and reliance on Neeson's brand leverage both art and technology. Creative assets were engineered for maximum emotional resonance while marketing data informed allocation of capital. The film's life cycle, from production to theatrical release to digital streaming, exemplifies an integrated model of financial intelligence supporting creative wealth. Cold Pursuit also highlights the importance of adaptability. Unpredictable weather, remote locations, and tonal balancing challenges demanded real-time problem-solving, blending on-set decision-making with predictive analytics and technical oversight. This adaptability is a form of operational intelligence, where art, technology, and finance are continually recalibrated to maintain coherence, efficiency, and profitability. It reinforces a lesson that filmmaking is an ecosystem. Each element affects the others, and success emerges from their orchestration rather than isolated excellence. Beyond immediate financial and narrative outcomes, Cold Pursuit's long-term value demonstrates the enduring interplay of art, tech, and capital. Streaming and syndication, catalog retention, and audience recognition ensure that the film continues to generate revenue and cultural engagement long after initial release. Intellectual capital, in the form of genre-specific innovation, stylistic cues, and tonal experimentation, further enhances its legacy. In other words, the film's true ROI extends beyond box office numbers to include cultural resonance, algorithmic visibility, and franchise potential. In reflection, Cold Pursuit exemplifies what Cinema Vault identifies as the ideal mid-budget synthesis: emotionally compelling storytelling, technically precise execution, and financially disciplined production. It reveals that even in seemingly modest projects, careful orchestration of all three domains produces a product that is both artistically satisfying and economically sustainable. Each choice, from camera placement to color palette, sound design to trailer testing, production logistics to tax incentive utilization, is part of a larger, coherent system, demonstrating that intelligent filmmaking is a holistic endeavor. If you found this deep dive meaningful, my literature-loving friends, consider liking and subscribing so we can keep decoding the business and beauty of cinema together. Cold Pursuit may be a film about revenge and snowbound isolation, but it also stands as a masterclass in how thoughtful integration of art, technology, and capital creates films that entertain, endure, and generate value across multiple dimensions.